Hi, everyone. I am Rachel Kai from Maven. Welcome to our panel about how marketers can stay in this ever-changing environment and craft a successful marketing strategy for 2024. This event is hosted by Maven, which is where leaders from the top companies in tech and business teach live courses. As an example, actually, two of our guests today have courses on Maven. Emily Kramer teaches building B2B marketing, which has run 5 cohorts on Maven, super successful. And Holly Chen just launched a new course called Growth Marketing Strategy for B2B, launching this December. So without further ado, I will pass the mic to Jay.
Thank you so much. My name is Jay Akonzo, and I'm excited to welcome you to this panel of marketing smarties here. I'm an author, I'm a speaker, and I run the mastermind group for business storytellers called the Creator Kitchen. And it is my driving belief that as marketing communicators, executives, leaders, practitioners, the most important skill we need to adopt and understand is how to resonate with people in this world so infatuated with reach. So I'm all about resonance, and I think today's panelists will resonate with you too. The theme, of course, we're going to look ahead to 2024 and what it takes to develop a successful strategy, the changes we're seeing between years and what these panelists are expecting of the industry, but also themselves and their teams. And of course, questions that you might have in that Q&A panel. But before we get started with today's programming, I wanted to give every panelist a chance to introduce themselves. Here's what I'd ask you to do, you all. Who are you? What do you do? You know, that old chestnut. What do you do? And also, can you recommend a piece of culture that is not about marketing? A film, a book, a podcast, an individual to follow, but you think if we consume it or follow it, would make us better marketers? And I'll go around the horn according to how I see it. So first up is Holly. Hey, Holly.
I'm really excited to join the panel. I'm Holly. I run a growth and marketing advisory collective called Exponential X. We work with SaaS companies to accelerate their growth, advising companies like Loom, Miro, ServiceNow, AppsFlyer. I also run a group leadership coaching program for underrepresented leaders called Ceiling Breakers. In terms of wow, that's a good question. I am a huge fan of coaching and leadership. So one of the books I read called Turn the Ship Around. It is written by a retired U.S. Navy captain, David Marquette, who turned the worst performing submarine with poor morale, poor performance, and worst crew retention in the fleet to the #1 fleet in the U.S. Navy. So I really love his take on leader-follower model, thinking through control, competence, and clarity. A really great read for marketers, and especially when it comes to leadership.
Awesome. Welcome, Holly. And around the horn, we have Devin.
Hey, what's up, everybody? My name's Devin Reed, currently the head of content over at Clary, which is the leader in the revenue platform or RevTech space. Before that, I was at Gong. And I also run The Reader, which is my side hustle, which is a newsletter and consulting business. So that's the professional who I am. The question, it's kind of tough, Jay. I've got two that I bounce between. One is the Great British Bake Off. Yeah, I know it's a hit. It's kind of like saying your favorite movie is The Godfather. Like, it's not that unique, but it has some phenomenal insights you can pull out in terms of how to tell a story differently. Because if you watch Great British Bake Off and then you watch American competitive cooking shows, they're night and day. And yet GBB seems to have a much larger following and a resonated following, if I may say, Jay. So that's what I'm going to go with today. And the finale is Friday, by the way, for anyone else who watches it.
Nice. We're bracing for that. And last but not least is Emily.
Hey, I'm Emily Kramer. I am the co-founder at Market One, which is a fund, a community. We have a newsletter. We teach courses. We do a lot of things, all to help startups build their B2B marketing function. Before that, I led marketing at Asana and Carta and a couple of others. And I always was the first marketer. So I did that like 4 times. So I've built a lot of teams up from scratch. My answer, I guess we got book, we got TV. I'm going to go movie, director, producer, writer, which is Wes Anderson, which I know is like, may take some of you back, but I'm a huge Wes Anderson fan. My dog's name was Tenenbaum, that dog. Nope. Mirroring on Zoom throws me every time. I'm like, I'm going to get this right. And then I just go like the opposite way, which is the wrong way. Like, yeah. Anyway, Wes Anderson's movies, like you always, if you were to just turn on a random movie, you would know it was a Wes Anderson movie. They stand out. They have a unique style, whether you love it or you hate it. My partner hates it. I love it. So there's that, but you always know, and it has a point of view, and there's a set of cast of characters. Whoa. You know the voice that it's going to be in, you know the sense of humor, you know all of that. There's a color scheme. It just stands out. The other thing is he creates like immersive worlds. So when you're watching it, you feel like you're in this like little fake world, and you kind of get lost in it. And so I think those are all things we can do with storytelling and with marketing and brand in general.
Fantastic. And anyone who's ever heard me show up publicly anywhere, even once, probably has heard me drop the name Anthony Bourdain. That would be my recommendation, because that man was a master of sitting with somebody during their seemingly mundane life and just getting to such an amazing place with them. And what could be more powerful as a marketer of taking the ordinary and imbuing it with things that feel extraordinary. So I want to get to our first question here. And this section might be loosely titled Marketing, Planning, and Strategy, because that's where a lot of us are at. And that's why a lot of us are here. So my first question, we're going to do, the first one's going to be around the horn. The next questions after that will be a little bit more Challenger-esque. So, but first, to get us started and warmed up for everybody, and we can go in the same order of Holly, Devin, and Emily. Imagine for a moment that you had the world's quietest CEO or CMO. They're not saying anything about 2024, but you have to get into their head a little bit to then create a strategy for your company's marketing, and also, of course, sell in and get buy-in for that strategy from that executive. What are some of the most important questions that you would be asking that CEO or CMO to get the information you need to then go craft a strategy in line with the overall business goals? So let's start with Holly.
That's a good question. It's like the most important question I ask would say, what success look like to you? I would ask what good look like to you, what great look like to you. So like ask them to elaborate a bit more. And then I would also ask, what do you think we should keep, stop, and start from 2023? And how did you feel that we did well or not well, to get a sense of how we executed for the year?
Awesome. Thank you, Devin.
Heavy breath as I try to follow. There's some really good folks on this panel. Honestly, I was even talking to my wife. I was like, I'm not usually nervous for these things, but I was like, Emily, Holly, like Jay, like these are legit folks. So I got to like bring my A game. So I'll let you vote at the end if I do. I agree, Holly. Wait, we're not allowed to say I agree. Jay set some preliminary rules. Holly, I would like to make an addition to your comment. The first thing I always start with, Jay, is the CEO slide, which is every single year, CEO has a slide that has 3, hopefully no more, strategic initiatives for that year. Now, pending the company and the CEO, it could be something like double revenue, right? If you're in tech, that's like, not these days, but, some big revenue goal. Then it could be like an international expansion. It could be a new product line, like these really big initiatives that have to go right. I always start the content strategy, or kind of like this marketing strategy, with what are our big initiatives, and everything that we're doing from that goal to metrics has to be very clearly correlated, from indirect to direct to short-term, long-term, all that different stuff. So that's how I start the mapping process. In terms of the kind of like, where do you go to get approval? Because I think that's the tough part. Sometimes people say, hey, Dev, let's invest a bunch in marketing or content strategy. And then you go to work and build this really cool progressive plan. You present it back and they're like, I don't really know about podcasts. Why should we do a podcast? Or I don't really think social media is where our audience is. And so the question I ask, sometimes directly or maybe indirectly, is what do we know about our audience and our marketing, and what do we think we know? Some things are data backed, some things are just opinion based, and we need to kind of delineate those things. And then follow up with, whenever I get resistance, if like, Holly's like, I don't really think that's going to work. It's like, well, where do you get your information from today? Who influences you on new ideas when you're solving things that, after a meeting and you don't know how to solve it? Where do you go? Who do you go to? Let's, tap into those audiences, tap into those channels, and use those to our advantage.
What I can appreciate about what you're saying, the podcast example looms large for me as a host, but also it's one of those representative things that somebody in an executive's chair might not get, right? Like, why? You see there's value, but why? And it's very similar to me to like selling a consumer app. It's like, well, this is going to save you time or money, or a B2B solution is going to generate value. If we can position our suggestions to an executive as one of those two things, hey, we have this goal, CEO, well, this is going to save us time or money in achieving that goal. Because if people listen to the podcast, they race down the funnel because they're huge fans. Or this is going to generate value. Here's why, right? So is the thing you're proposing in line with the goal of the CEO, is what I'm hearing from both of you so far. And then maybe underneath that, where do you put it? Some things generate value and sound like direct response. Some things save time or money for the things that do that. And marketers have a really big time selling in those things because everything seems to have to be direct response in some sense. No, but some things make the direct response stuff work better, work harder, save money, save time. All right, let's go to Emily. Same question. What are you trying to pull out of that executive to inform your strategy? What questions are you asking?
It's harder to be last in this, isn't it? But I got it. It's good. I'm fine. But I did love both of the answers. I don't agree, but I liked them. I do agree, but I'm not allowed to say it. Anyway, so I think that one thing I've noticed, and this kind of goes to Holly's point, is that all founders, CEOs have a different idea of what marketing is. And you as a marketer, your job always, not just like for the start of the year, is to make sure you know what that is. Because there are going to be times that you need to push back and be like, hey, that thing you slacked me last night at midnight, like we're not going to do it. And here's why, because these are our priorities and all of that. And these are our goals. But you need to know, like, sometimes you're going to need to be like, yeah, I'm going to hustle and I'm going to fit that in and I'm going to deprioritize other things. So you better know like what to do that on and what not to. So whether that's, you need to understand what that is, what that thing is. So I like to ask things like, if there's one thing that you are really bullish on, or you think will drive step change growth, like drive the most impact this year, what is it? What are you going to be upset if we don't do? What's one thing we didn't do this year that you really wish we had? What do you think we should have put more effort into? Like trying to get really specific, so they don't just like name everything, to what that might be. So I will stop there. I work with founders and CEOs all the time, so I have like tons of questions I ask them to try to tease stuff out, but those are some of my favorites.
Yeah, it feels like you were starting to answer a question I'm seeing in the chat right now from Frank Morris, who was saying, if you're going to join a startup where they're, resource constrained and the founders or partners are sales focused or they have a sales background, where would you focus your marketing, or how would you position it to those leaders? And it does sound like actually you got to ask questions first, and you got to get into their mind first, and understand what do they view as marketing to begin with, what are their expectations overall, the biases and assumptions they're coming with. So I like that, unintentionally we seem to start answering that question. I want to do something a little bit differently with the next set of questions here. I'd like to make a few statements that it might be rattling it around in people's brains right now here in our industry. And I want to see where you all fall. And then we'll have a quick discussion after each statement. So on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is I strongly disagree and 5 is I strongly agree, where do you fall on the following statements? And then I'll just sort of pick out people based on their answers and we'll have a chat. So 1 is strongly disagree, 5 strongly agree. Here's the first statement. It is a good use of our time as marketers and marketing leaders to put together a marketing plan for an entire calendar year. 1 to 5. Can you just do a show of hands on the panel here? 1 to 5, strongly disagree is 1, strongly agree is 5. It's a good use of our time to put together a marketing plan for an entire year. Devin says 2. Holly, where are you at? Show of hands. 5. Emily?
I need to know what a marketing plan is, so I'll give it a 3.
Okay. All right, cool.
It means lots of different things.
First.
Marketing plan means different things to everyone you ask.
That's fair. That's fair.
I'll tease that out a little bit too.
That's why I did a little shuffle on the way up, Emily. I did this like kind of too, but I've got questions before.
I was seeing you could go either way there, Devin, but you did fall on the disagreement spectrum. I'm curious as to why.
So I had the same thought. I'm like, what exactly is a marketing plan? To me, the strategy is an obvious 5. Like Holly shot up 5 and get like a strategy for the year, directional stuff, of course. If you're talking plan like deliverables, absolutely not. And here's why. It was my first time a few years back, February 2020. Put yourself back to what happened in March 20. So February 2020, I'm at my first marketing leadership offsite. I'm the head of content strategy at Gong, and I've got my first plan for the year. And I literally opened it up, Jay, with, hey team, so unless the world goes to absolute shit this year, this is what we're going to do from a content strategy standpoint. Less than 3 weeks later, the world did go to shit. And that whole plan meant basically nothing. We had to start from scratch. Now, I don't forecast more pandemics. I really hope not. But the idea of like, let's map out every week of the entire year by January 1, to me seems like an incredible waste of time and just ignores a lot of the trends and opportunities that are going to come throughout the year that you need to leave some blank space for.
Interesting. Okay, cool. And I'll go to, everyone was going to get a chance to talk throughout the panel, but in the interest of time, let me get one more response on this statement. We'll move on to the next statement. Holly, you were 5 and you were like, you were pretty smiley about it. Why?
Yeah, I like that's a good point, Devin, you made about what is a marketing plan? Like in my mind, a marketing plan is the strategy that comes with OKRs. So we do need to set the goals for the entire year. We need to know where we are going, and we need to have the goalposts. Yes, like the details, especially the details for H2, is not going to be like massively detailed, like laid out, but like we need to know where we're going. And I would say, like, when I do the annual plan, I also do the very detailed Q1 plan, because that's where the rubber hits the road, where like the channels and the tactics and what we're doing. And then, like, especially in the hyper growth startups, things will change, like you said, right? Like every 6 months, we used to change our OKRs or even like North Star metrics at really hyper growth companies. So you do need to be very flexible in looking at where you are on the plan and then adjust based on your customer changes and the market changes.
So reminder to the folks watching, there's a question and answer section on the bottom of Zoom. You see the 2 little overlapping speech bubbles. If you have a question, please drop it there. That's what I'm monitoring for questions to avoid anything getting buried in the chat as people give their own answers. So if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A. And also, you can go over there, even if you don't have a question, and upvote the ones you most want to see the panelists answer, right? So you can participate even if you're not overtly putting a question there. And so that's what I'll be lifting, is the most upvoted questions. And we have some dedicated time coming up to take a break from the program and answer those questions. So just a quick reminder there. Second statement. There's this thing that's been happening in media for a while, and marketers tend to be right behind media when it comes to content, which is you fall in love with the talent of media, right? The voice, the columnist, the social media personality, the or influencer, the host of the podcast. Media has always had a job function called talent, capital T talent, not a compliment, it's a job. Marketers, you're kind of behind a logo, right? Maybe the byline is there, but it's hidden on the blog. Maybe there's a host of the show, but you're not really sure who they are. They're just so-and-so that works at this brand, right? And I think maybe we're realizing that some of that stuff feels a little weaker, because if you look at the engagement of, say, social profiles with a logo associated, they seem to pale in comparison, especially in B2B, compared to those like your panelists that you see here. So here is a strongly worded statement. Scale of 1 to 5, 1 is strongly disagree, 5 is strongly agree. Where do you fall? In 2024, not 2025, but in the next year, marketing teams need to get beyond creating content. They need to act more like media and learn how to create creators. That means they need to have dedicated motions where they help their personalities thrive. They help their marketers and executives become public, trusted voices to carry to market the content. That's a strongly worded statement. Where do you fall? 1 is strongly disagree, 5 is strongly agree. In the next year, they have to cultivate talent, creators on staff to be the public voices. Panelists, show your hands. 5, 5, 4. Okay, interesting. Very interesting. Emily, can you start us off? Why the 4?
Yeah, because I think it depends on who your audience is. Like some audiences just don't really care. Like, and some products, like for some products that aren't maybe source of truth products, or you're in them only sometimes, and it's something that solves a really specific pain, but isn't necessarily something you want to think about all the time. Like it doesn't make sense to spend time on that. So I think for some, like if you're targeting marketers, like, yeah, you should probably have your marketer doing that. And, like I'd be the first to say do that, but it really just depends on like, what I have this concept called marketing advantages, which are like, what are the things that are going to help you win, that you have sort of innate to your company, to your product, to your ecosystem, to your story. And I think it depends a lot on that and what stories you're trying to tell. So I think there are situations where like, yeah, like you need to do more of this, but there are definitely situations where it's not going to give the most, it's not going to be the best use of time for some companies with some products, with some audiences. So,
okay, fair enough. Holly, you were on the reverse. You were a 5 pretty quickly. Why was that a statement you strongly agree with?
Yeah, I mean, like building trust is the number one commodity for marketing, and that insight is really important. At the same time, I don't believe everyone on the marketing team should be that voice. The CMO should be absolutely that voice, because the CMO is the representative of the brand, of the voice, of the product. At the same time, the CEO should, in my mind, be the voice of the brand most of the time. So like maybe the entire marketing team can work for the CEO to become the voice of the brand in addition to the CMO. In the modern world, I think the first party voice from a person is trusted more than ads or other channels.
Understood. Thank you for that take. Devin, I do want to actually have you answer too, because you were also 5. I look at you, I look at your audience. You mentioned at the top, you have a side project, which is media, which is content centric and audience centric. You have an audience publicly. I might not know what Clary does, but I might know Devin, and then by extension, start to fall in love with Clary. Of course, there's pros and cons to being a very public person. I'm curious how you see it as somebody who has grown a big audience.
I'm trying to be disagreeable, but I can't help but be complimentary, because I like that Emily was like, yes, if. And Holly, the first thing you said was trust. The first slide on our content strategy is our mission is to build trust at scale. That's what we're here to do. And to your point is that's what people trust the most is a face, a voice, a personality, because that's what resonates more than a logo. And so I'm completely all in on this. We have an influencer strategy, which is internal and external. So there's the ones you can, pay to play. And then there's obviously the kind of air quoting grooming process of identifying, coaching, and then giving people that work at Clary an opportunity to go be on stage. And it's mutually beneficial, assuming they're interested, because they get to build their audience, they get to build up their credibility and their worth in their career, right? That perceived value. And then of course, Clary benefits in some of the more obvious ways as well. And so this is something I've been doing for years myself, then scaling and employing other employees to do the same. And we get not only, numbers on dashboards, but the anecdotal feedback of someone just responding to an email, newsletter, or just an unsolicited comment or email to our CEO. Like those are little signals that have really big impact and are telling you, hey, keep going in this direction because it's working.
Yeah, my friend Tim Washer was hired as a speechwriter at IBM. Now, large companies have always done this. They've always had some people and some strategies and core competencies and maybe some agencies surrounding the executives as they move publicly, but it always felt like protect. It always felt like mitigate the downside, make them just not bad, right? And maybe there's an upside, right? Talent. I know how to cultivate talent if I'm theringer.com, if I'm Vox Media, if I'm, a collection of podcasts on a network and I run that network. I wonder if there's a place in the future of marketing teams where the core competency in this play is not Devin works here. It's we know how to create or partner with Devins. Something to consider. I want to move on to the last thing. Folks, my soul is here aching today. As a podcaster, as a public communicator, I see so many podcasters starting to create video. Nothing wrong with that. I see the videos being clipped from the main audio interviews, and I see those videos with gorgeous animated captions and emojis and B-roll, such beautiful animation on a video that says nothing at all. What are we doing? Well, we are repurposing our content, because if you make a thing and then you turn it into 17 other things, I don't know, step 2, question, step 3, profit. I don't know. We love the repurposing of the content, people. We're here to talk strategy. Marketers fall in love with tactics. On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 is strongly disagree, 5 is strongly agree. Repurposing your content is a strategy. Can we rank that, panelists? 1 says Devin. Holly says 2. Emily gets the benefit of analyzing her fellow panelists, wondering where she falls, and repurposing that content is a strategy. 3. Okay. Devin, you were right there with 1. I don't know, maybe we're simpatico, you and I. You heard my cynicism, but why are you feeling like it's a 1? You strongly disagree.
Okay, let me just give a quick analogy. I'll be fast so other people can speak too. Have anyone here cooked a dish, or their spouse or their mom cooked a dish, right? Like for dinner, right? And you eat it. And then that moment comes where you go, do we take what's in the pan and do we put it into a Tupperware and try to eat it again tomorrow? And if it's you, it's easy to make that call because you decided did you like it or not? If it's your spouse, you might want to be a little bit more cautious with the way you answer this question. But the truth is there's times where you make a meal and you go, you know what? Let's just toss it. It's not that great. And there's other times where you say, hey, let's throw it in the Tupperware and reuse it again. That's the same thing with content. Just because you've created something does not mean that there was actually quality insights or actionable advice that deserve to go across different channels. The other thing people forget is some content is channel specific, and that's okay. And it's okay not to just take content and blast it across multiple channels. The other thing too is they say, hey, we have 7 channels. Let's take this thing and put it across all of them. But you're not really good at any of those channels because you're so wide. So it's really like, and I don't want to go into a different example, but it's like, what is your core channels that you're using? And let's invest in there first and then repurpose where it makes sense. But it's a very small part of the strategy. It's not a strategy in and of itself to run your content or your marketing.
Makes sense. Now I saw Emily throw up a 3. Holly, remind me what your number was.
2.
It was a 2. Let's go to Emily. You were a little more in favor of like, actually, no, this does constitute a strategy. Why is that? There was a little bit more to it in your mind. What was that?
Yeah, I think it's part of a strategy. And like, I don't think anyone here is going to say that it's like a whole strategy. Like, what is the content? But I think if your content strategy is like, we're doing lots of content with customers where we're diving deep, or influencers or other people, like things that take, or deeply researched, like data studies, things like that, it needs to be part of that content strategy to say, and we're going to repurpose it. Otherwise, if you're spending like all of that effort and like not repurposing, you're not going to get the impact out of it. So I think it like needs to be clear in any content strategy, like I have this like fuel engine framework that I talk a lot about in my newsletter and my content. And it's like, you got to know like, what's the fuel? What's the story? What's the content? What are you talking about? And then like, what's the engine? Like, what are the channels that you're using? Which is kind of what Devin was saying. And like, you need both of those things in a content strategy. And so the engine piece can be, we're repurposing this across, these 5 channels. So I think that it's part of the strategy. And I actually think it's an important part in the sense that like, you've got to have that engine planning piece in there too, when it comes to content strategy. So
yeah.
Great.
As an author, because I'm outside the corporate world at this point, as an author, what you're taught to do is you have to validate ideas quickly. You have to make sure, is this something worth pursuing that could support a whole book and a whole platform of offerings and a keynote and all those things. And to validate the idea is one way to repurpose. It's not take the thing, put it in multiple places. It's take the thing and then change how you articulate that same idea elsewhere and see what gets a resonant reaction. Like, can you get a small number of people reacting in big ways? So validating the idea is one way we authors repurpose content. But the key there is you're trying to see, how might I say this so it connects? So there's a strategy within the tactic or overriding the tactic. The other thing I see is people are taking it and quickly putting it everywhere. But the other way to do it is, no, it's not a validation of the idea play. It's actually a distribution of the idea play. But then you have to make sure the idea is worth distributing, right? So you have to give it a little time. You publish it and it hits and you reward your winners. But to Devin's point, if you publish it and it doesn't hit, don't put it in more places. Those people know, like, and trust you, and they're signaling the work ain't working. And you're going, my biggest fans dislike this. Better put it in front of more people. I don't know, folks. Dicey strategy. Speaking of strategy, I have one last question for this round, and then we're going to go to the Q&A section for a time. What are each of you doing in 2024 that you weren't doing even 12 months ago? What's changing most notably for you? I'll go in reverse order of the order I've been going in normally. So we'll start with Emily.
I'm trying really hard not to say like the use of AI. So I'm just like, I'm not going to say it. For me, it's a little different, like as someone who runs a fund and then runs a community and content and doesn't work like full time within a company. So it's a little bit different, but I think for me personally and for Market One in 2024, I think, we've built a lot of the foundation and we built a lot of the frameworks, and it's oddly, maybe this is just top of mind, but it's about like doing more with that. So it's like less net new ideas and more like, we have this like really solid foundation, all of these newsletters, let's turn that into more evergreen content. Let's really make it clear, like from start to finish, if you're building, B2B marketing team, early to growth stage, like what do you do? What's the how-to? So let's take these newsletters, which are more like opinionated, and let's turn that into some evergreen content. So it's really like, we've laid this framework we've laid this foundation for 3 years. Like, let's build the house rather than keep building foundation, which I think we've been doing a lot of. So we're building the house, or maybe we're building like the second story on the house. I'm not sure. I think this holds also if you are at a startup that's growing. It's like, eventually, like, you don't need to do every channel. Like, if there are things that are working, like double down on those things. And I think that's what we were all talking about in the content repurposing thing, but it goes beyond content. So
there's that
double
phrase
down on
again,
what's
like,
working.
Reward the winners. So quick reminder, housekeeping wise, we're going to move to a Q&A section in a sec. I want people to head over to the Q&A channel or tab at the bottom of your Zoom window and upvote questions. Even if you don't submit them, upvote the ones that you most want us to answer. So let's move over to Devin and then Holly. Same question. What do you think is most notably different if you're thinking about marketing in 2024 versus 2023?
It's kind of like more of like scaling some stuff we've kind of been doing at Clary. So I've been there for a year. And so it was setting a lot of the foundation of kind of a brand refresh, standing up thought leadership, and some of that kind of media and influencer play. So it's kind of been like a year of setting a lot of foundation. And we're at the point now where we're starting to say, okay, as we look at planning next year, where is it obvious? And actually, I phrase it this way: where would it be irresponsible not to invest more and like double down into that? And the things that we've seen incredible success with was the founder brand, that Dave Gerhardt's talked about with our CEO Andy Byrne. We stood up his LinkedIn strategy this year, and in 10 months he got 4 million impressions, and we're seeing his audience double. We're seeing inbound increase month over month. Some you can correlate to that, obviously, some not. And so for us, it's like, okay, if we have this playbook that works, how are we going to scale it to our CRO or any other roles that match the buyer persona from that we sell to? And then the second one is similarly, but kind of trying to continue to dominate the channel of LinkedIn, which is then the external influencers, and trying to say, okay, how do we get more programmatic? We did some bets, we did some short and long-term agreements this year. How do we standardize this and make this a legitimate channel? And of course, get more mature at measuring the impact aside from the channel specific engagement rates.
And Holly.
I alluded a little bit before. I do think trust is the number one precious commodity in marketing, and increasingly, because there's information explosion and people are overwhelmed by all the information out there, they are turning to different degrees of trusted circles to make buying decisions. So if I think about, different degrees of trusted circles, is the first circle is like people right? Like your colleagues, your professional contacts, and maybe your first degree contacts on LinkedIn. The second degree could be your other second degree LinkedIn, or communities, professional communities that you belong to. Third degree could be the review sites, right? Your chat GPT answers. And then the next one is the content you put out from a brand or the ads that you're doing. So this different degrees of trusted circles have different degrees of influence in the buying behavior. So, we've already been doing the review sites and the LinkedIn marketing, but next year, this year, I've done a bunch of tests around influencer marketing, especially influencer marketing on the more B2C channels like TikTok, but for B2B clients, and are getting really good ROI and return from those channels. I think people's attention span is getting shorter and shorter, and that's why TikTok are growing to 1 billion MAUs, and that's why repurposing video is so important, like you said, right? So testing these more B2C channels that are influencer from a first party voice that people already trust have brought on a lot of good ROI, and I think in 2024 we're going to double down on these influencer channels.
Yeah, I'm getting a ping from my producers saying I can't trick any of you to taking extreme lack of nuanced stances, because you're all basically like, it depends. You got to be strategic about this. Thank you for doing that for us marketers. Also, how dare you for me as a host of this? Because I'm not getting the one little stand. I'm not getting. It's better. It's better for our attendees.
You're not getting the superlatives. I always do this and I never do this.
Yeah, never. This is out. This is in. It's the year of X. No, I love not X, the app, because that's not true. But it's the year of Y. No, you're not saying that. Thank you. Thank you for being so nuanced. Let's go to some questions. Quick reminder: we have a lot of questions, and I'm going to be pulling from the ones that are most upvoted. If you submitted one late, you might be like, I can't get to it. Well, two of our panelists, if you think Emily and Holly are really, really smart, they have cohort-based courses on Maven.com. Now, the benefit of cohort is you have live access to these people during the course. It's not like video content, right? It's like accountability and getting stuff done and some content. Devin and I, we got to catch up a little bit to them, but you can access those two live in their course on Maven. Let's go to the first question. It's from Danielle Messler. Hey, Danielle. How do you approach changes in the plan for 2024 as the year goes on, especially in an early stage company? How much change is too much versus the usual fast pace for a startup? Maybe we can start with Devin there, and then Emily, I saw you nodding a little bit, and then we'll end with Holly on that question. But I think for the top two, I'll go around the horn, and then I'll take one by one after that.
I will try to go in reverse order, which is how much change is too much change versus the usual pace for a startup. So I've been in startup land my entire career. I will say honestly, Danielle, the normal amount of change is a little bit more than you're very uncomfortable with. That's the truth for a tech startup. You should just get used to a lot of change. That said, if there's so much change that you can't actually progress projects and things just aren't getting done, that's probably a bigger problem. But the truth is there's a ton of change. I almost cursed, but I'm keeping it PG-13. So how do I approach changes? It's pretty much on a quarterly planning basis, where what I think about is what's changed in the market, what's changed in society, and what's changed in our company. If your company has change of leadership, rifts, change in employee, the skill set you have, that's going to change. What trends are happening? AI, TikTok, still. What's going on at the market level, consolidation for RevTech. So every quarter you need to take a look and a pulse at what are these changes that's happened around my marketing strategy and what justifies changing or, maybe slight pivots and tweaks here and there, just to make sure you're providing the most relevant and effective marketing messages and outputs that you can.
And just for people to place your answer a little bit in context, Devin, what stage of growth is Clary? Either a funding round you've announced publicly, something public you're willing to share, just so they can place the
Series
size.
F. We're pretty deep in the alphabet, and we're
so
about
growth stage,
10 years, 1,000 employees, and this
Cool.
is by far
That's
the
helpful.
largest company that I've
Got
worked
it.
for.
That's really helpful. Emily, you're up next.
Yeah, let me just get a little more tactical here, which is the question of like, you've set these OKRs, like what happens if priorities change? One thing that really bums me out is when companies have goals, whether it's OKRs or some other system. I don't really have strong opinions there, but you have goals. And like, what happens when you're completely off course or you're doing something else instead? Like, I am not opposed to changing goals midway through whatever period of time it is. Which some people are like, you can never do that. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Like, if something is wildly off and priorities change, go we did this a lot at Asana. Like, we would go and we would review and we'd be like, we're replacing this goal for this goal. And here's why. And I think it's important, like as the year goes on, sometimes goals are just completely unattainable, or if you've blown them out of the park, it's important to kind of like reset on some of those things. So in my opinion, even goals or OKRs aren't set in stone. And you should always be using those to prioritize. And if they stop being helpful for prioritization, you need to change them. So that doesn't mean you can just like make them way lower and be like, we didn't get there. There needs to be some thought behind it. But I think like that's the level of change to expect, is that like even those aren't set in stone. What should be set in stone is really like, or should be a little more thoughtful throughout the year. Like, what are the key storylines that we have? Like, how can we win? What are we doubling down on? Like some of these strategic things, you got to like stay the course on some of those things a little bit longer to see how they're working. So to just like flip flop on some of the key strategic drivers or the key strategy drivers isn't going to work. But
the art seems to be, where do you have conviction? Like, and we have to let it play out a little bit longer sometimes. Holly, anything to add that wasn't covered? Otherwise we can lead with you for the next question, but I do want to give you a chance to answer this one too.
The final point I would say is like the extreme version of too much change is like being reactive. It's like whatever, like the quick changes in the market, someone said something, and then we have to also do that thing that the competitor is doing, is a risk. So you do want to make sure you are sticking to the broader strategy while being flexible.
Yeah, discerning people don't trust that like you're the creator who says I'm an AI expert simply because ChatGPT got hot quickly, but you were previously an NFT expert, right? Like, let's not go down that path. Rakesh is bringing the fire with this amazing question. I think we all feel this pain. Here's the question, and lots of upvotes here. During planning phases, how do you deal with executive leadership that focuses on short-term wins, either month over month or quarter over quarter, through metrics like MQLs and SQLs, instead of long-term vision and strategy that boosts inbound prospects? Anything that sounds like we're dealing with short-termism, how do we balance that with long-term? I mean, I feel like we all have that pain. So thank you, Rakesh, for that question. Devin?
I can take one. Well, so the short-term stuff is usually around what can we clearly attribute, which is usually things like form fill and like some of the more safer traditional marketing things like gating content or webinars. And there's nothing wrong with webinars. I obviously am on one and love them, but things that you can clearly say, hey, Jay put his email address in here, therefore activate attribution, and then we can see our dashboard and all the things that are necessary from there. The thing I kind of grazed over earlier though, Jay, was when I feel like I'm getting stuck in that box of, not the long-term bets, not the visionary stuff, is I asked the CEO, the CRO, when's the last time that you put your email address in for a gated ebook? When's the last time that you did this? When's the last time you did this? Now, sometimes it's last week and sometimes it's last week, but only time this year. And we're in almost December, right? So then I say, okay, where are you getting that information from? How are you being influenced when you look at new technology, implement new strategies, all that sort of stuff? And it's usually the harder stuff to attribute, which is, podcasts, thought leadership, content that's ungated on your website, the things that do take time to build up that trust. And so I think once you kind of spin and say, hey, like kind of show them a mirror a little bit, like, hey, you actually do the consumption patterns of the people we're trying to get to buy our software, but we're not being given the freedom to execute some of those strategies and some of those long-term bets. And I think the second thing is a lot of times maybe the marketer just isn't doing a great job, candidly, of like setting expectations of here's how long it's going to take. Here's the early indicators of success and the laggards, and setting up expectations up front. So that way, 2-3 months in, when your strategy isn't working, it just hasn't played out yet, and you can defend that plan better.
Yeah, Devin, what I'm picking up on there, just to synthesize a little bit, because I think it was a really important point, is it's the decision maker, the economic buyer, let's say an executive, if it's B2B, is not as trackable and measurable as the lower quality lead that has a higher number and is maybe more measurable and trackable, right? So the brands that seem to influence the market are the brands that influence the influencers, the decision makers. They're not looking for the lowest common denominator. They're trying to influence the most powerful numerator. 1 out of 100 sounds like not a success. I want 100 out of 100. What if the one is the CEO? What if the one holds the budget, right? You're probably not going to measure that through the traditional inbound marketing playbook. Putting names in a database probably won't work if you're targeting an executive. So let's go to one more response on this front. Emily.
Yeah, I want to take this to sort of the root problem here. Like, why is there like this obsession with leadership on short-term wins versus the long-term with marketing? And I think it's because most leaders, and this is verified through talking to like tons of founders and executives that aren't marketers, is they think marketing and sales are the same thing. Like they think marketing and sales are just like two sides of the same coin. They're not. Marketing is more like product. This is in B2B, sorry. Marketing should be run more like a product team than like a sales team. Sales is intentionally focused on short-term goals. They're focused on quarterly goals. They're focused on a specific area of the funnel, closing the damn deal. Marketing is focused full funnel. Marketing is focused short and long term. Marketing is a multidisciplinary function. There's lots of different roles. Product and design, same way. And so if you start to explain to founders and other leaders that marketing isn't just short-term focus, and that tension and balance and that full funnel focus actually is what creates a good go-to-market strategy, I think it clears things up a little. Like, stop thinking about this like sales. If you wanted us to be gold on the same exact thing, short-term revenue, like, we'd be one team. We'd do it all. We just do sales. And so I think like that's a common misconception. And it kind of like that line of like, hey, marketing's actually more like a product engineering design team than a sales team. And here's why that tension is good, tends to just help reframe the thinking of like, this isn't just about short-term metrics. Short-term metrics important, short-term goals important, but so is the long-term and building that brand and increasing conversion and all of those things over time. And so I like to get to the root problem there.
I think asking great questions is something we led this session with, which was important. One of the things that didn't come up there, but might apply here, Emily, is, instead of thinking to yourself, this executive is so short-term focused or doesn't get what marketing is, what if you could ask, okay, boss, let's do a breakdown of percent time that I spend or we spend as marketers. What percent would you like to see us allocate towards this quarter's success and growth? And what percent would you like to see us allocate towards making next quarter's percent and growth even bigger? Right? Because that's how they're still thinking short term, quarter, but you're thinking, oh, we got to do something today to make tomorrow work better. Because otherwise tomorrow is going to be just as hard, if not harder, than today was. Right? That's not what leads to this. That's what leads to this, maybe this, probably this. Let's go to one more question here in the chat, upvoted by many of you. We'll go back to our initial question that we started with. How detailed, the phrase marketing plan, right? How detailed do you get when quarterly planning or building Q1 plan during your annual planning? The more specifics you can give us, even if it's a white labeled version or a for instance version, the better. Really, really specific examples would be great. You're putting together a marketing plan for Q1. How detailed is that plan? Is it here's our strategy and here's 3 hypotheses, or something more about deliverables, somewhere in between? Holly, anything that you could offer on that question?
I would say quarterly plan needs to be quite detailed. So you would want to have the overall, like company goal, and then how marketing goals ladder up to the company goal. You would also want to have different teams, departments under marketing have their own OKRs that ladder up to the marketing goal. And then for each person, they should have their own like OKRs that ladder up to their team's goal. So like that needs to be like a structured and corresponding was the overall. The tactics is typically like the bigger tactics is on the marketing team level, and then the smaller tactics are typically on the individual team level. Like and each of the tactics, and there needs to be goals attached, like estimated goals attached to it, meaning like, yes, we're going to start a podcast program. Then we aim to drive, X number of listeners and X number of downloads. And like, even though it's a new program, you don't have a baseline, you still have some benchmarks from external sources that you can find to make an assumption and put a stake on the ground on the goals. And then like, in the middle of the quarter, you want to check how are you tracking against those goals.
Becoming clear to me that this can be a 7-hour session, or we should all just somehow carry on our conversations asynchronously forever and ever, because all these questions are incredible. I want to move on just to make sure we get more of them out there. And there is one final question I want to ask all panelists to answer. So I'll kind of cherry pick who answers until the last question, and we all will. This is something I've heard a lot out in the world, but also here today in the chat. We're talking a lot about content. We're talking a lot about showing up publicly, either as voices or on our logo-based pages and profiles. How do you get buy-in from team managers? This comes from Erica. How do you get buy-in from team managers, department leaders, SMEs, to get non-marketing folks to take a % of their job away from whatever their job is to contribute to things that look like marketing activities? Devin, I love that smile you had there.
There was the correct version of that answer, and then there the smile you saw, the devilish smile, was like, then there's your backup plan. So your first plan is so I come from a sales background, so what I say sounds sales led. That's why you have to intrigue their personal desires and curiosities. Like you have to get them to want to do it for intrinsic purposes. If you go to a busy, analyst or engineer and say, hey, I need data from our product so I can create thought leadership, can you just add this to your plate? They're not going to take your meeting, or they're going to give you lip service and never follow up. So what you have to do is start to source and figure out who cares and who's your SME, who should be talking. How do I get them to, interested in this? The devilish smile was, or you just go to your CMO and your CEO, if you have their ear, and you go, hey, here's this vision, here's this thing we could do, but I need Emily to give me 2 of her engineers for 2 hours a week or 3 hours a week so we can do this thing. Otherwise, it's absolutely impossible, which is totally fine. I'll just throw this deck away and we won't do that cool thought leadership thing you've been talking about for 6 months. And then that loss aversion kicks in and they go, okay, let me go talk to Emily. Not that Emily would ever withhold resources from me, I hope, but you get the idea.
You know what everyone loves? Everyone loves compliments. Everyone loves feeling like they are revered and celebrated, or at least respected.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to tie together 2 ideas here, because this is something I struggle with all the time. I interview people, right? I need to get you to take something out of your job. And if it's an author on the book tour, fantastic. But what if it's an executive? What if it's a practitioner? People love compliments. So 2 ideas I want to tie together. Be Denzel Washington in Training Day. This stuff's chess. It ain't checkers. Multiple moves here, people. In the future, I'd like to have a pipeline of SMEs internally contributing to my content. So I'm going to go and have some coffees and some lunches and send some emails or some Slack messages to people outside of my core job, outside of marketing, to be like, Devin in product, I think the best insights at this company come from product. I just want to pick your brain for a sec. I think the smartest people in the world it's got to be HR. Holly, you are so friggin' impressed. Can I just learn from you? It'll inform my marketing, right? And 2 or 3 meetings later, you're like, Holly, can I just interview you? Like, let's take this outside the company because I've just learned so much from you. You're amazing, right? That's a chess move, right? It's building a relationship and trust first. So this stuff's chess. It ain't checkers. All right, last question here. So this is something we're all invested in. If you're, say, like a mid-career marketer, you might not be starting out, you are thinking about a strategy plan, so you're thinking strategically, or you aspire to, but you're also not the person in control of the whole company or even maybe the department. You're a mid-career professional. I think you face a very important inflection point in this moment in time. And that inflection point can break in 3 ways. You can continue to rise in your career, you can plateau for an entirely too long period that becomes painful, or you can decline. To our panelists, what is one, I'm not saying it's the only, but what is one skill you would most suggest somebody there acquire and practice and master in 2024 to make sure that inflection point breaks in their way and their career is amazing from here? Again, I'm not saying it's the skill, but it's one that you think is paramount. Paramount also means the. Crucial. All right, let's start with Holly.
I a strong believer in leadership, because as you grow more senior, you're going to start working with people who have no idea what marketing is or what marketing does. You're going to need to like communicate with the founder and working with your functional peers who don't really have a deep understanding of marketing. So how do you tell a compelling story in a language that they can understand? How do you actually bring clarity without being defensive? How do you motivate your team when the time is tough and when you sometimes don't agree with the decisions coming from the founders or other teams, but you still need to execute on some of these decisions? And how do you like keep that integrity while motivating your team? And those are the key leadership skills that propel someone from a middle management to a senior executive.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Let's go to Emily and then Devin.
Yeah, for sure. So I was going to say something similar to Holly, but I'll add something new to the mix. I think it's very important to like learn to speak the language of non-marketers. And so trying to do that a lot in my newsletter as well, not to plug it, but just really like, what are some of these frameworks that you can use or these ways to talk about things that are going to not be stuck in marketing jargon that people don't care about or understand. So that's important. But I think the other thing too, in terms of your skill set, most marketers earlier in their career, well, often you start as a generalist and then you become a specialist and then you need to become a generalist again. It's just kind of the way. I did that the wrong way, but you know what I mean. I'm having trouble moving in the right direction today with my hands, with my like back, I don't know, whatever. But the point here is that most marketers either fall on, again, I'll use my fuel engine analogy, either the fuel, like the creation of content or creative side, right-brained, fuel, content marketing, even product marketing side, or they fall on the growth side, the sort of engine mathematical side. And the best thing you can do to get into a leadership role is to bridge that gap, become the glue that holds those together, like become really good at helping execute campaigns or launches or things like that, or learn about the other piece. Because you do have to get to more of a generalist perspective to be in that leadership role and do it well. So do whatever you can, find the little areas of overlap where you can start to learn about what's going on in the other sort of silos within marketing, if possible.
Well
so
said.
Be a fuel and engine person.
Awesome. Yeah. And last but not least, Devin.
I'll speak as the non-executive. So I haven't climbed to that rung of the ladder yet, but I can speak to what has helped me climb to where I am so far as quickly as I have, which is I don't view, I'm head of content, just a quick reminder if you missed it. So I don't view it as we create content. I don't look at it as deliverables and outputs. I look at it as we are creating demand. And I've made my career on the back of, I know how to go to a company and create demand to get people to want to come take a demo, take a demo faster, go through the sales cycle faster, all that stuff. So creating demand, I would say, is like, you're always going to have a job somewhere if you can create demand.
Yeah. I mean, that's what a lot of us do, right? We know how to expand the top of the funnel, but more fully to an executive and what they want to see. We know how to straighten the funnel. That's huge. Yeah. I want to thank all our panelists here, Holly, Devin, Emily. Please find them. I think you're going to see some links come through the chat where you can find them. So we could shout you out that way. Head to the chat if you want to connect with them. And then I'll toss it back to Rachel. But thank you all for the great questions. And all the work you do is so important. This has been a bizarre and difficult year. May 2024 bring you a little bit more momentum and traction under your feet. And if not, come back to us. We'll be around. We're on the internet.